Let's get into that situation with UConn, because I thought this was a big story yesterday in Big 12 country, and it is really not a surprise that this did not come to fruition with the Big 12 and UConn, because as we've talked about on the show, sources close to that situation have told us very bluntly and directly that the money does not add up for UConn to join the Big 12. I think there are some presidents in the Big 12 that were willing to take a financial hit on UConn to join the league. The problem is the majority of presidents and administrators in that league were not. And I was told again yesterday by a source very close to that situation, this came down to dollars and cents. And with the instability in the House NIL settlement, universities, I think, just were not willing to subsidize UConn football, which they would have had to do, and have UConn football be an absolute loss leader for the conference on the whole. That is something that Brett Yormark could not sell to his constituents. As much as you want Dan Hurley and that men's basketball program and the women Husky program as well in the Big 12, there was no way you were going to be able to subsidize UConn football to the level that you would have needed to, even if they did not come into the conference in 2031, even if they had waited till 2031 or not come into the conference at all. Adding UConn lock, stock, and barrel never made financial sense. And we talked about this. Does UConn operate with an athletic budget at the level of $150 to $200 million just on football? They do not. And that money was going to have to come from somewhere, and it was likely going to be from other members of this conference, which for a majority of members in this league was a non-starter. And I think that's always going to be the question with UConn. And when the discussions came up, I was told about UConn not playing football or not joining the Big 12 on football, UConn said that was a non-starter for them. They want all of their sports in one conference. And as much, and I think this is a really important point, because it was pointed out to me multiple ways yesterday. As much as UConn has love and respect for the Big East, they are well aware that being an independent in football and being a team really with the level that they play at in college basketball, leaving significant millions of dollars on the table every year, they really wanted to find a way to get a Big 12 move done for all of their sports, but it just didn't make financial sense. And especially on the same day this announcement was made, the House settlement on the NIL stuff completely fell apart, and it looks like that's going to head to trial. I think, Jake, we've been pretty spot on with this one again. It just never made financial sense for UConn to join the Big 12.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because, like you said, I mean, the basketball programs at UConn are dominant. They're highly valuable. They'd be a great addition to the conference. But, I think the Big 12 is keenly aware that, they can't afford a mistake right now with expansion. You obviously want to look at expansion opportunities. You really, of course, want to grow your conference, grow your brand, grow your footprint, as they always say. But you're not going to do that in a way that brings you risk or, exposure, if you will. You're not going to, force an addition of UConn's basketball programs into the conference, while having to take on a football program that just is, just brutal, honestly. Like, it's just not good. And I think that's the hard part. And I think, the Big 12 handled this well. I think Brett Yormark continues to be a phenomenal businessman. I think the relationship he has with his administrators at the different schools in the Big 12 is one of the main reasons that the Big 12 has been able to grow, has been able to build this security in the conference. And, I think at some point UConn will find their way out of that situation. But I think what this, negotiation, if you will, what this look into expansion and going to the Big 12 did for UConn is it showed them, hey, like, we got to improve the football situation somehow. And that doesn't mean that you got to go out and compete in the college football playoff. But what it does mean is that you either need to stop playing football or you need to figure out a better stadium situation that is more attractive to a power conference.
Well, I think the stadium point is a very well-made one, because when you look at the way that UConn operates football, they rent a stadium. They lose money on tickets and concessions. They lose money on branding. And frankly, as an independent, they don't have a media deal that pays them significant dollars. And it's becoming a point where if you are the Big 12 and you already have a smaller rights deal leading up to 2031. And as I explained on the show previously, this is why you weren't going to add UConn football until at least 2031, because you're not willing to rebate UConn for being a really bad football program. And I think we saw that in week 1 where they got torched. It just never made a lot of sense. And again, I think the stadium point is a really good one. There's no fixing that. They don't have land on their campus to build a stadium, nor do they have the financial resources to build an appropriately sized revenue-generating football facility that could house lacrosse and soccer and track as well. They don't have those kind of resources at UConn. The state does not have those kind of resources to allocate. And the real problem here is UConn is committed to football. UConn is not in a place, at least not right now. And I think those words are really important. At least not right now. UConn is not in a place where they are willing to either drop football as a sport or join a different, smaller conference to make some kind of money, because that breaks up their athletic department, which is something UConn doesn't want to do. And I think we all have to remember UConn is in the exact same model as Notre Dame is. The only difference is you're talking about an iconic, historically important program at Notre Dame that has a free pass into the college football playoff system. And you're comparing that and contrasting it with UConn, who has no history in college football, is not a powerhouse, doesn't have a stadium, and doesn't draw a TV or an in-stadium following. It's a really tough situation for UConn, and I think wisely so. UConn tried to leverage their success on the basketball court to prop up their football program, and I don't think they ever got close to doing it in the Big 12. I was told yesterday that there was never agreements in principle. There was an agreement between the Big 12 and UConn that they had, a like-mindedness, that they were pushing in the same direction, that they wanted to build a basketball powerhouse, which is what UConn was selling the whole time. But I think you're looking at a commissioner and presidents and administrators in the Big 12 that are far too savvy and understand they don't have a lot of financial flexibility in the Big 12. They're not getting $100 million per school for a TV deal. They're not, generating significant private equity money or over-the-top revenue with a $50 to $80 million TV distribution like the SEC is.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing that. In the Big 12, your question is, are you going to have more than your conference champion in the college football playoff? Whereas in the Big 10 or the SEC, it's how many of us are getting in. Is it 3? Is it 4? Because it's certainly going to be more than your conference champion.
Certainly.
Right?
Certainly.
You're just not in a place where you can afford to take a financial risk of this magnitude. I think it's a very savvy move by the presidents of this league.
Yeah, and I also think, the notes and lessons learned out of the ACC adding SMU and how bad that looked, I think is something that administrators, are just a little wary of. Not to say that adding UConn, with their specific situation would look as bad as the ACC did, when they added SMU. But I think, if you were to have pushed this forward and you were to have added UConn, given their specific situation, the first thing everyone would have said is, well, all you guys are trying to do is be good at basketball and you're not a football conference. That's what the haters would have said. And I just think that the Big 12, while they're clearly not the best football conference in the country, they're the best of the rest. And what I mean by that is the ACC's got nothing on the Big 12 on the football field. The Big 12 is superior to the ACC. You want a basketball conversation? Fine. But on the football field, the Big 12 has them. And I think the Big 12 appreciates the fact that they can be the little brother, if you will, to the Big 10 and the SEC, and they don't want to mess that up, and I don't blame them for that.
Yeah, and then there's this NIL situation, and if you didn't see this yesterday, this was not that surprising. They go to court to have a judge approve the settlement, and the main sticking point, as it turned out, with the NIL settlement in this House case is the plaintiffs really, I think, drawing attention to this booster component, where the defendant, in this case, the NCAA and its membership, want to be able to lock out boosters from paying players directly for anything that's not name, image, and likeness related. And the struggle right now for the NCAA is that you have a situation where you have boosters hiding payments to players in the name of name, image, and likeness. Hey, why don't you come cut a 30-second spot for my tire store? Here's $55 trillion for that, right? Like these overpayments where boosters are clearly paying a player to come to a school. Well, the problem is courts across, parts of this country have said, and they have really put a stop in place from the NCAA enforcing those rules. You are not allowed to tell a kid how much money he can get and for what purpose. That's essentially what courts have said. The kids and athletes in college athletics are allowed to say, hey, give me $500 and I'll put my face on a t-shirt, but give me $5 million and I'll come and play for your university. The NCAA wants to say you can't take money for an agreement to come and play at a select university. Well, courts have said that's not lawful. And they have put an injunction in place to stop the NCAA and its memberships from enforcing that rule. And that crept into court yesterday when the judge in the House case said, hey, we've got to address this because when you tell people how they can get paid and why they get paid, that's not the most popular opinion in the world. And I agree. And I think at this point, there is no other outcome than for this NIL lawsuit to go to trial. And if it goes to trial, I think it could be a complete disaster for the defendants in this case, in which would be the NCAA and its membership. I think it's a complete disaster. I think yesterday was a win across the board for boosters. I think it was a win across the board for this, what's the right way to say it, Wild West mentality that we have that is clearly pervasive across NCAA athletics right now, where there are no longer bagmen. There are just stacks of cash being handed out in broad daylight. I think that's what was won yesterday. The right for boosters to say, hey, come play at SMU, come play at Oak State, come play at Notre Dame. Now that's not unlawful. You can now come out of the shadows in the alleyways and you can come out of the criminal element of it. And you can continue to do it in broad daylight until somebody says that's against the rules. And I don't know that that'll ever be the case.
Yeah. And I just think that, we've always treated this as like some taboo thing. Like, I think about obviously everyone points to like the Reggie Bush USC stuff, with Pete Carroll and everything that went down there. But isn't this just what we do in our country? Like if we step back and we, put the fact that we're talking about college football aside for a second, is it not how this country works where, hey, I want you to do X and I'll pay you Y. Will you do that? Yes, I will.
Quid pro quo.
Right? Like that's what we do in our country. That
Indeed.
is like, that's how it all works. So the idea that the NCAA is trying to stop this under the guise that, hey, you're a college student, you're a student first, you shouldn't be making money because it's academics, because that's just what we've decided. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And I just think the NCAA's time would be better spent figuring out a way to create a system that benefits everybody. And I'm fine if it benefits the NCAA too, right? Like, the folks who run the NCAA itself, like not just the school administrators, but the board of the NCAA. Cool. If you guys want to make money on it too, fine. But it can't just be you making the money. It can't just be the AD.
The money
the
being
chancellor.
paid to the school who will then pay it to the player.
Yeah, like, come on.
Because I think that's what athletes are worried about. That you're going to be in a situation where a booster who owns a car dealership, an oil company, whatever, right? If you own a large business and you want Jake to come and be your quarterback, you pay him $5 million for a 3-year commitment. Well, the school wants you to pay the school the $5 million. The kid wants you to pay him the $5 million under the table. And the IRS wants you to pay the kid $5 million on top of the table so they can get tax money out of it.
Which I'm fine with. The tax portion, I think, is very straightforward. We see this in pro sports every day. Like the tax portion shouldn't be confusing for anybody. Like that should be very straightforward. We have precedent.
Yeah.
Like we've got something to follow. That should be the easy part, which is ironic, honestly. But like the idea that, hey, pay the school so then the school can get their cut and then we'll pay the kid. And that, like, it just is all like everyone's trying to get their piece of the pie any way they can. And it feels like we're scared to just say, yeah, hey, dude, booster can pay the kid. And what's crazy is no one wants to say, hey, if the kid is that good at football and they come and play for your school's going to benefit and you're all going to make money.
Well, and I think the other part of this is Super League.
Yeah.
Because the argument that the defendants in this case, the NCAA and its membership, were making is we need a competitive balance. We need a way to put a cap on this so that we can have, competitions across all levels. To which I say that's not the free market system that we have built this country on. And I understand whether it's a professional league of any nature, you want to put a salary cap in, okay, but that doesn't preclude a kid from making money. It does not preclude a kid from getting a Land Rover, a Corvette deal, a Lambo deal. It doesn't preclude him from wearing a Rolex. And the hard part is that is going to impact competitive balance because you're going to make more money at Colorado than you're going to make at Nebraska. So Colorado's going to get a better cut of player, let's say, if in a game this weekend.
But why should Colorado be penalized? Because they prioritize the modern day business.
They shouldn't be. But this is why we need a Super League.
Yeah.
And if this goes to court and if this goes to trial, the NCAA is going to wind up paying out more money on this. So you're going to need to make more money on this because now I don't see any way that football's not a $200 million operation.
It has to be. Wasn't it?
How is it not?
We were looking before, and Ohio State's already like 180 plus, like 190, I think.
Making $200 million plus.
Yeah. Like
you're looking at a situation where player compensation is going to push football into a $200 million business. And you need a Super League. And I go back to what we've reported for over a year. I go back to what Kyle Whittingham has said, the head coach at Utah, about how it's inevitable. We're going to have a college football championship on a Saturday and a Super Bowl on a Sunday. We're going to have an NFL playoff model. We are going to pay players. I'm telling you, it's coming.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean conferences are going away. It means that football conferences are going away. We won't have SEC versus Big Ten anymore. We'll have the AFC versus the NFC in college football in some model or form. But if you're so worried about competitive balance and the implications of the booster, all this is doing is pushing you closer and closer to a Super League, which is where we should all be pointed at right now. It's as simple as it can be said.
And by the way, if you don't think that the private equity deals that just got done in the NFL are going to have an impact on college football, you're crazy. Because that's all that is. That's setting a precedent. That's saying, hey, well, look at what they're doing in the league, right? 10% ownership of a franchise. Why wouldn't we do maybe not ownership of the school, obviously, but 10% stake in the returns on profit in our football program?
You either win enough games to get in or you don't. And if you don't, you're not in. You want to make the postseason? Like that's what needs to happen.
And by the way, don't cry me a river from these schools who are like, oh, well, it's unfair, even though we haven't invested in the last 10 years and we haven't done any winning and we haven't paid our fair share. Now we want our fair share. That's
and real quick,
problem.
Before we get to your comments, this is why Dabo's such a problem. This is why Gundy's such a problem. This is why Nick Saban retired, because they don't want to deal with this. But you better, because you need to. It's here, whether you want it to be here or not. UW fan Jim, why is the salary cap in the NFL legal? It absolutely prevents players from getting paid more. It does not. The difference is a salary cap is how much the team can pay its players in totality. The NIL suits and the house suits are boosters and outside entities paying kids for Nike deals. Hey, endorse my car dealership, endorse my restaurant, endorse my happy ending massage parlor.
Store.
I was going more massage parlor. Anyway, that's why it's different. And I also think a salary cap is what is needed, because universities have the right to pay their players. and their player compensation will be between $20 and $23 million a year, which already prices teams like UConn out of football. Right? So it's not that there's not going to be a salary cap at the NCAA level. There is. We're not arguing over schools paying players. We're arguing over the NCAA wanting boosters to report and pay the school who will pay the player.
Yes.
Instead of allowing the player to take as much money as he wants from anybody. That's the issue. Hey, I'm Shedeur Sanders, presented by DraftKings. Can gambling operations pay college football players? It's a very interesting question. Very interesting question. Mike Smith, because the NFL and Players Union agreed to it.
Well, and that's the other thing.
And it's collectively bargained.
Yeah. I mean, the NFL is so much more organized, right? I mean, it's such a, like, by size of like humanity, it's such a smaller entity than a nationwide NCAA, hundreds of schools. Like, you're comparing a grain of sand on the beach to the ocean in this case.
And I think unionization of college football athletes, or college athletes in general, is coming. There's already bodies doing it. So I don't think we're far from that at all. Willie Wilson, yep, probably want to wait on ACC, which makes good business sense. I'm curious what happens with the ACC situation. I'm very curious because Brett Yormark's got his ducks in a row on the ACC. So that's I think that's something to watch. Paulo, NIL is good for local businesses. Some, yeah, certainly. For some, no doubt about it. Nick D. Nice D, Nick.
Yeah.
We need 4 regions where they play a round robin. The 4 region champs go into a playoff, but it's too complicated.
You're thinking of it the wrong way. Like you're thinking of like, hey, like from a national perspective, it's not going to work that way. You're going to have the Super League where you've got the NFL playoff model, and it's going to be extremely straightforward. You're not going to have round robin.
Yeah, I think that's critically important.
Yeah, you're just going to have head-up matchups. Loser goes home. Yeah. Like, you're not going to have double elimination, NIT brackets. Like, we're not doing that. That's not happening.
I cannot believe Lamar. The highlights are on TV from
it's
last
wide
night.
open, bro.
Oh my God, the Zay Flowers throw is egregious. I mean, missed him.
And by the way, to your point, what kind of throw is it? It's across his body from right to left. That's why he missed it, because he doesn't have the mechanics to make that throw.
Oh, so bad. Let's see. Mike Smith. That is what I understand as well. Pausing the UConn edition due to presidents, I believe, is a way to try and pressure UConn to drop the idea of adding football to the Big 12. I think it's a non-starter. It's also why I think Gonzaga has so much leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And why Gonzaga has been comfortable to wait.
Gonzaga.
Because I think Gonzaga
Gonzaga
understands that the landscape is going to change. Probably multiple times in the next 5 years.
Yeah, certainly.
And if the ACC melts down, is that good or bad for Gonzaga? I think it's really good for Gonzaga. Because Gonzaga is viewed as a powerhouse. Now, obviously, you lose some leverage if you don't continue to win at the level they've won at. But that's the game that we play. That's a game we play. So I think it's a very interesting... the Big 12 has no business subsidizing UConn football. And I know we've talked about that ad nauseum.
Mm-hmm.
No business at all subsidizing that. No, nor should they. I just... Big Daddy Magic. Playa. You are sad devotion to the outdated Notre Dame is fascinating character flaw in your almost perfect character. Okay, I don't know why it's a sad devotion. Why are you sadly devoted to the Buffalo Bills?
Notre Dame, our mother.
Like, what do you mean sad devotion? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Mike Smith, I missed that Yormark Gonzaga sound drop.
Yeah, you like that, dude?
Jake likes that drop a lot.
Yeah.
Gonzaga.
Gonzaga.
How can you add UConn when you have the ACC on the brink of divorce and having to fight out custody disputes with much more flexible schools? Because I think if you were able to get UConn without football, That strengthens your position with Virginia, Louisville, Duke, Carolina, who you're not getting, Florida State, Miami. I think it strengthens your position because you look at what UConn represents. A win over UConn is a massive win with where they've built both men's and women's basketball. And I think the revenue stream that men's and women's basketball has become dictates that you have partners who are dedicated to basketball. So if you are the Big 12 and you can get UConn and Gonzaga, that gives you incredible leverage to make phone calls if the ACC melts down.
Yep.
Which is why Brett and his constituents in the Big 12 have been so focused on expanding with the right partners.
Yeah, and I think that's why the Gonzaga thing just hasn't quite happened yet, because it's a timing thing more than a fit thing. It's a clear fit. It's just I would guess for the Big 12, when you add, think about how the whole Pac-12 thing went down. Like the Big 12 was real keen on making sure that they didn't add like a school this week, a school next week, a school the following week, and a school a month later. They wanted to have one announcement, one press release. Hey, we're adding the four corner schools. Like, this is what we're doing. They're coming in. And so if you think about it, like, it doesn't make sense for the Big 12 to go and add Gonzaga and then add UConn and then add Louisville and the Ace. Like, they're going to want to do that in one swoop.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's get to work on some games. Hour number 2 of the Monty Show, presented by our friends at Canyons Golf. Canyons Golf, the official golf course of the Monty Show. Hello. Love Canyons Golf. I've got the big Indian wedding starting tonight and tomorrow. Can't wait to get out on the course on Sunday. Iron swing feels pretty good right now. I have just enough time. I have about 90 minutes where I'm allowed to go to the driving range tomorrow morning. And then I have to put my balls back in the Mrs. Monty jar, and I have to, put on the full Indian outfit and go to this wedding tomorrow. But I'm telling you, I can't wait for Canyons on Sunday. Going to crush. It's going to be amazing. There's nothing better than playing golf at altitude and watching your ball fly. That's what you get at Canyons Golf. Never mind that it's in a world-class resort like Park City Mountain Resort at Canyons Village. Never mind that you can play 18 beautiful holes of golf and then get a world-class meal. Never mind that it's priced like a Muni. Never mind you can book online. Never mind that you get concierge service where they carry your clubs. You get GPS and a beautiful cart. You see wildlife. Oh, it's all good at Canyons Golf. I'm telling you, folks, hook it up online. Just search Park City Canyons Golf. Book your tee times. Tell them you heard about it on the Monty Show. Let us know when you're going to be up there. I'd love to play golf with you guys. Let's hook it up. Canyons Golf, the official golf resort of the Monty Show.
Hey, Monty.